Hi, my name is Mark McPherson. I'm a water rights and environmental lawyer in Dallas, Texas. This last legislative session, 2011, the legislature passed a bill, House Bill 571, that affects aggregate production operations. Now, there are a couple of threshold issues you have to figure out as to whether or not these new rules are going to apply to you or not. And the first one is whether you're in the aggregate production business. You'd think it'd be simple, but this is the TCEQ after all. Aggregates are generally defined as materials that are used in construction, including sand, gravel, crushed and broken limestone, crushed and broken granite, dirt, soil, caliche, that sort of thing. But it doesn't include clay or shale for ceramic tiles, brick, or other structural clay products, because clay or shale used in that way is not considered to be an aggregate. If you're dealing in aggregates, then you have to figure out whether or not you're regulated under these new rules or not. And the new rules were adopted on June 13, 2012. They're found in 30 Texas Administrative Code Chapter 342. Again, as I said, they're administered by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. There are a series of exemptions. The way the rule is written is all aggregate producers are covered unless you can fit into one of these exemptions. So here are the exemptions. First one, you don't need a registration if all of the aggregates that are produced at your site are used in a cement kiln, a lime kiln, or a similar operation that is on site or at a related site that you also control. You don't need to register if all of the aggregates that you produce are only used in a public works project of the state agency or local government. You don't need to register if all of the aggregates you produce are used as fill or other construction purposes on site or at an adjacent site. In other words, at the construction site or at a site right adjacent to the construction site. You don't need a registration if all of the aggregates produced are used to construct, modify, or expand a landfill or other solid waste facility. And you don't need a registration if all of the aggregates you produce are not primarily for commercial sale. And every one of those, it's always all. If there's any part of your operation that doesn't fit into one of those exemptions, you lose the entire exemption. You also don't have to have a separate registration for the processing plant if your aggregate plant is at your own registered quarry, borrow pit, or other extraction site. So if you don't fit into any of those exemptions, you have to file a registration with the TCEQ, and the initial registration is required beginning September 1 of 2012. That registration is going to have to be renewed annually, and the TCEQ has to conduct an annual survey to identify these aggregate production operations and ensure that they're registered with the agency. So they're not just going to sit around and wait for you to do it. They're going to actively pursue trying to figure out who does this. They recently set their registration fees for this, and I've got those. I'll get to those here in a minute. Here's what I think the most important, possibly aggravating factor of these. The TCEQ has to conduct an annual inspection, once every 3 years. They got to inspect every single aggregate production operation in the state of Texas that's registered once every 3 years, beginning September 1 of 2012. There's a big but, or however that goes with that. If you're an APO, when you submit your original notice of intent or your initial inspection, when you file that initial registration, then if you also submit a notice of intent to conduct a self-audit under the Texas Environmental Health and Safety Audit Privilege Act, you will defer your inspection requirements until September 1 of 2015. So you get a 3-year pass. Again, you have to file this with your initial registration. If you file the initial registration without doing this, you've blown your opportunity. So what you do is you file with your initial registration a notice of intent to conduct a self-audit under the Texas Environmental Health and Safety Audit Privilege Act. You do that, you defer your inspection until September 1 of 2015. If you conduct business without registration, the TCEQ can assess penalties on you of no less than $5,000 per year and no more than $10,000 per year. The maximum penalty on that's $25,000. Now let's go over the fees real quick. If your processing plant is portable, or if it uses from 0 to 10 acres, your annual registration fee is $250. The TCEQ, as most of you know, has the ability now to register permits online. They're called e-permits. If you use e-permits for any of these, you save 25%. So for these portable processing plants or those that disturb 0 to 10 acres, instead of paying $250, if you do it electronically, you're only paying $187.50. If you disturb, or if your operation affects more than 10 up to 50 acres, your fee is $450, or $337.50 if you use e-permits. If your facility affects more than 50 acres up to 100 acres, your fee is $650. That's $487.50 if you use e-permits. And if you affect more than 100 acres, your fee is $900, or with the e-permits it's $675. You know, the kind of ironic or funny thing to me about that $900 is the statute that was passed, House Bill 571, told the TCEQ that they could set these annual registration fees at no more than $1,000. So consider yourself lucky it could have been $1,000 instead of $900. So that's a quick summary of the new aggregate production operation rules, 571. If you need any additional information on this, feel free to give us a call at the office, 214-722-7096, or you can send me an email, mark, M-A-R-K, @texasenvironmentalaw.com. Thanks.